Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads with my co-host, Sean Francis. I'm Brian Altunian. We're in a very enviable situation, Sean and I, because we get to talk to amazing people who are serving the special needs community. Occasionally, we find folks that have some superpower, and we have other folks who, we get to revisit and have the conversation again. Today's conversation is with somebody who we truly love so much. Our first episode with her was a couple of years ago, and we felt like we only scratched the surface. And 2 years later, we did. There's some magic. There's some magic that we are so excited to share with you. As we get through this conversation with Katie Asher, stay tuned for another episode of Just Two Dads. Hey everybody, I'm Brian Altunian along with Sean Francis, another episode of Just Two Dads. We're in our fourth season, and in this season we are not going live on Facebook, although we are posting our episodes on Facebook. If you're catching us on other Google outlets, you can still, we'll have some stuff in the comments for you to click on, links to click on and whatnot. So please leave comments. As it turns out, our first episode with Katie was removed from YouTube. It's on all other all other podcast outlets, including Google and Apple and iHeartRadio. So if you're catching us on those, go back to episode number 93 with Katie Asher. It is fascinating beginning of the story, and hopefully this is going to be an opportunity for us to do a little follow up and talk about the future. It's going to be amazing. If you're also catching us on WSTX AM radio down in the U.S. Virgin Islands, thanks for making us part of your listening day. Thanks to Billy Footwear for always being a great partner and sponsor. There's a link Sean's going to put in the comment section there. Click on the link. You'll get a 50% discount on any purchases that you make if you use the link. Billy Footwear, adaptive footwear, and the story about Billy Price, the founder, is amazing.
Two things.
Yes.
One, that discount is, I believe, that's 20 or 25%. And then the other thing that takes place is we just realized, because we're no longer actually doing the show live, the comments can't be put in there without a destination. So in the show notes, you will see the link where you can get your discount in Billy Footwear.
Perfect. Good to know. This is new for us too. 4 years in, we're still exploring and doing new things. So we're going to jump into this conversation. I'm so excited about it. Sean Francis, how are you, my friend? You ready to get rolling?
I really am. We always say, welcome back to Just Two Dads, but that is more applicable today than ever before with our guest. And I appreciate her being here 10 times as much as I ordinarily would, because of the stuff that we did not cover in the last visit, which we will today. The fact that we just went through our son's IEP last week. So our guest is someone whose story as a hero, just in terms of going from point A to point B and overcoming obstacles, that portion of her story is so incredibly inspirational and overwhelming. It's become the most viewed and downloaded episode of our podcast in its 4-year history. But that is only a portion of her story. A bigger part of her story is the concept of telepathy, communicating with one, especially her son on the autism spectrum, through telepathy. So much so that she has been part of a podcast which has exploded called the Telepathy Tapes. And today we are here to really talk about that, the path leading to that, how she got associated with that incredible podcast, and just more of the superhero that is Katie Asher. Katie, welcome back to Just Two Dads.
I'm so excited to be here. I love you guys so much. So I'm just thrilled to be here.
Us too.
Thank you.
Very, very much so.
So
anytime
this
I
is the portion
go on
of
Facebook, I'm like, oh, my friends.
Oh, thank you. We feel the very same way.
For sure.
So we usually begin the episode by talking about each person having their superpowers, which comes from their origin, who they are, and everything. We touched on so much of that. You need to, if you're listening and hearing this for the first time, go back and look at the first episode to hear that information. What we want to begin with is the concept of the telepathy. And I also have a message to the general listener, which is, we were talking about the people that we become and cutting ourselves slack for when we might not take the most out of a situation. And I'm saying that to myself as well, because I feel that there's so much more to you than we knew. And the idea of the telepathy itself, we didn't get into that. And I'm cutting myself that slack to allow us to begin that conversation. Let's talk about how that whole thing started between yourself and your son Houston and the community that exists. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think a little bit about the story of Houston and that discovery of communication is, first of all, it's such an emotional and loving story. But if you want to tell that again, Katie, just to kind of launch us into,
start with his, if you will, with his diagnosis and whatever it was he wasn't doing, and then obviously past the breakthrough.
So he had regressive autism and lost his skills rapidly, and basically anything he was doing he lost, and then progressively became less and less able to communicate, control his body, function, and basically would seem to be unaware of his environment and doing what we would call behaviors, which I do not like that word at all, because what we learned later was that they have an entirely different sensory system and the inability to motor plan. So they were trapped in a body that they couldn't control. And Houston likes to describe it like a boat with no one driving the boat. So it's just going crazy all over the place. And that's how his body is, like a rudderless ship.
And you noticed the regression around 2 or 3, right?
It was earlier than that. The actual diagnosis, because back then it took forever to get a diagnosis.
Right.
So what I saw, I witnessed much earlier, but the official diagnosis happened at 3.5 was when we actually were officially diagnosed. But so he had no ability to communicate his needs, and the things he would, when he was finally able to express any words at all, it was echolalic, which I think most of the people who are aware of autism know about echolalia, which is repeating things or scripting Disney phrases. And so
commercials and things of that sort.
Yes. Right? Like the intros, he would always like coming to video in 1998. And I'm like,
exactly. Elijah does that still sometimes.
Stop it. Or my favorite was coming to VHS. I'm like, really? We've moved on. We're on digital.
Elijah doesn't have problems with the chronology, but he's like, starring Samuel L. Jackson. And I'll ask him, what's Samuel L. Jackson in, bud? And then he'll tell me. And then he'll rattle off a sentence incomplete, so you just don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah. And so essentially, what I didn't know at the time was, I was viewing his understanding based on what I could observe. And that, unfortunately, what I could observe was not a representative of what he actually understood, because he didn't have motor control. And everything we observe is what the body is able to motor plan. And if they can't motor plan, then what we are observing is not a good reflection of what they understand. So he went 2 decades without this ability to communicate reliably in any way, and was robbed of all of his education, his, the right to be included, the right to be treated as with the language and the respect that we would give anyone at a particular age level. Clearly, you treat a 3-year-old, you talk to a 3-year-old differently than you talk to a 15-year-old. And so he was robbed of all of that, and he was treated like the infant his entire life. He was talked down to, he was talked like a child, he was treated like a child. They would hold up a stop sign for him to stop, they would hold up placards for him to, it's just really demeaning. The way that all of that is.
Yeah, for sure. You call that perceived incompetence, right? Because
that's correct. That's exactly what it is.
Within our structure that we know, not within their form.
And at 20, at this point, is he completely nonverbal, no communication whatsoever? Is he typing, spelling?
At 21 is when the breakthrough with spelling happened. And before that point, the only, legitimate conversation we'd ever had was that one moment when he was 17, which was the IMINHERE.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, I take that back. Sorry, that was, I'm sorry, I messed up. So the one legitimate conversation we'd ever had was when he was 17 and he said, Mama, I love you.
Mama,
And that was the first time he'd ever said my name or said he loved me without just repeating. It was the first initiation of that ever.
So beautiful.
And so then we progressed to age 21 when I found out about spelling. And he is, for the most part, non-speaking, except for that echolalia or the scripting that I shared. I might get one word out of him like pizza, or something like that, or bathroom, or pooter, which meant computer.
Let me ask you this, just real quick. So 21 is when you discover spelling. So I'm trying to figure out what year that was, because I guess what he has available in terms of technology to spell is obviously dictated by the time frame. What year was
2018. And I'll actually talk about the technology thing, because I think that's a really important thing for people to understand. And so the way you start is with like 3 letter boards. So I learned about spelling, and basically I ran into some friends. They told me, some old friends, they challenged me to learn about spelling. I went and met with them, and they blew this non-speaker that I'd known since he was a little boy, sat there and started spelling out. And I remember he hit the letter Z. And I remember thinking to myself, what word is he going to spell with the letter Z in it? It's not a common letter that we use in most words.
Right.
And he spelled out, do not let time, money, or the fact that you've tried a zillion interventions over the years prevent you from doing this. It's the real deal. It's not a cure. It's a chance for us to be known, the same chance that everyone else gets effortlessly. And we don't appreciate the fact that everyone else, really, that's what we all want. We all want.
That's everything, being seen and being heard.
Yeah.
You know what I'm taking away from that? One, that's a long group of words. You remember every last one because of the profound impact that it had on. How old was this child at the time?
It was like someone had, those were the words, that's when hope truly lit a match.
How old was this child?
At Houston, he was 18. He was 18, okay, 17 or 18.
That child, how old was that child at the time that was doing the time?
That's what I mean, 17 or 18.
He was 18.
17, and Houston's 21.
It's Houston that's doing this. Yeah.
It was Houston was not doing that. It was his.
No, it wasn't Houston. It was the friend that she was talking about.
Yeah.
So for those that are listening and maybe not even a part of the community, understand when Katie says spelling, you're talking about the ability to communicate by typing, because the term is quite frankly even new to me within the past couple of years.
I do realize that we use it so freely in the community that those who are outside of the community don't understand what that means. And for example, if I said signing, you would know exactly what I meant, because even though you're not in the deaf community, the word has been used enough that that is the communication method that they use. It's a type of manual communication. Spelling is another type of manual communication, except they have even less control over their body. They don't. People who are deaf have motor planning. They have control. And what people don't understand about signing is it requires a massive amount of motor control. You actually have to use facial expressions and huge body movements, as well as minor fine motor. And if you have a motor impairment, especially with motor planning, and you can't feel your body, sign language would be an inappropriate form of communication. You might be able to use a few symbols, but that's not the way that you want to communicate the depths of your soul if you don't have the depths of control over your body. So what spelling is they take motor down to gross motor. They take it away from the fine motor and they put it in the gross motor of the arm. And when Houston first started, his ability to control was like this. It was so rough.
Yeah.
And so that progressed, and we started developing those motor pathways. And then he could go and touch one letter, pull his arm back, and then another letter. And what those movements were pointing to individual letters that accumulated to individual words, and then to individual sentences, and then to whole thoughts, and then to a body of that had the depth of understanding for him to be able to communicate everything he was thinking and feeling. That's not a one day sit down and do this. It takes time to build up those motor skills to be able to communicate so much.
And these are flat boards with letters on them. So they're just hitting letters on a board, and somebody's scribing, right? Somebody's actually writing
it's
down.
very important to scribe.
Yeah.
and they get very frustrated when the communication partner forgets what they did, because it took them so much effort to point to 3 letters, and then the communication partner forgets. That's another whole issue.
That's fascinating, because I think when most people hear spelling, you say, oh, so this is someone that just picks up an iPad and starts typing. Well, one, that's not the case. 2, you're talking about the challenge of being able to have the motor skills to actually do the typing on any kind of device.
Well, and the boards are not even to technology. This is sort of more rudimentary, right? They're just flat.
And that's what's so important. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So this is what's critical to understand, and it's so important to understanding why this gross motor movement of spelling 1 letter at a time, which takes a very long time. Why can't they just pick up a typewriter and type? I get asked all the time, why can't you just use a device? And it's very frustrating, because so I mentioned very briefly about their sensory. And this is where this is kind of the telepathy kind of comes in, that's so important to understand. So what is happening is their sensory system is incredibly attuned to all energy. So to you and me, we see light, we hear sound frequencies, we feel texture, right? Which is matter, right? We smell chemicals. Well, in their mind, first of all, they're taking in far more energy than you and I are. So they're taking in, like, you and I can perceive with our physical senses 4% of the actual energy around us. And we don't even know how much they're perceiving, because it's the percentage is so high.
Off the charts. Yeah.
And then on top of that, because they don't have this, they don't go through the sensory synapse pruning process. There are 2 things are a result of that. One, these sensory pathways intertwine with each other. So they are actually seeing sound. Houston explained that when he was young, that it took him a long time to learn what was the actual original source of something. Was it originally a light, or was it originally a sound? Because he was sensing both.
Is that the same as synesthesia?
That is the synesthesia.
That is synesthesia. Yes, right.
Yeah, so it's the blending of senses.
And just for context, Stevie Wonder, who we know has no sight, has synesthesia, but then so does Pharrell Williams.
And that's what's so unique is, that's why our view of sensory is so skewed, right? It's so limited, it's tiny. And their view of sensory is massive. Well, all of this is information, right? It's all energy. And if your brain is taking in all of that energy and you're not able to control your body, it makes the sensory motor it basically interferes with the sensory motor integration process in development, which is why they can't control their body, but they still have all this sensory information coming in at them. It's also why they're so brilliant and why they remember everything, because they're getting too much information. But that's too much, right?
Let me ask you this, Katie. Where are you? Because your qualification, obviously, for these statements and everything is that, well, I'm Houston's mom. So I'm a mom, and I'm going to do my homework and my research, and I live it. That's where I get it from. But I'm asking, because I know some people will be wondering this, and because now I'm developing an even more ravenous appetite for the information myself and trying to figure out how to deepen the connection with my son and even other people that are not on the spectrum. Where are some of the places that you gather some of that info? Because when you mentioned the percentage, that's great. Go ahead.
It was definitely over a process. I really felt like this whole time I was researching, I was trying to understand. He would give me a little piece of information, and then I would try to go and understand what he was sharing with me. He was explaining what he was experiencing, and then I went to try to find the science to back up what he was explaining. And that's kind of how the process went. So the more I learned, the more I started realizing the relation between a lot of these concepts that he was sharing with me. And that, of course, it just led to a massive amount of research. And I wish I could tell you that I got it all in one place and it was really easy to find and I could give you that, but I didn't.
Right.
I was in 1,000 different wormholes, just picking up little pieces.
I can relate. Yeah.
And, somebody who was an expert, who was a physicist understanding, light, was explaining, why colors are important and how they're all different wavelengths, and how these guys being able to see different wavelengths made sense and the different wavelengths were different frequencies, which were different energies. And all of those energies reflected a certain emotion, which emotion is also energy in motion. And that's literally what it is. And so it started to all make sense. And so it was just a collection of research and evidence. And I think I accumulated quite a bit of it to make a pretty solid case.
Sure.
What I find amazing in all of this is that you have encountered along the pathway here. I didn't understand it initially, but this concept of apraxia, a disconnect between, the mind and body, right?
Yes.
Some cases they don't even know where their body is, or that they actually have a body.
Have one
limitation.
Yeah.
Right?
And that comes when I was talking about the sensory. So we all have massive amounts of sensory synapses when we're born, all of us, 100%. So this ability to hear thoughts is actually intuitive to all human beings. In fact, like mothers have experienced this. They'll be nursing or holding their baby, and they'll have a thought, and the baby will have the reaction to the thought on their face.
Wow.
Because the baby's taking in everything. There's no division. Like you're connected to them. They're feeling everything you're feeling. And so their body's having the appropriate response. And there, of course, as we develop, those sensory synapses start pruning. And it's not just like one event. It happens over time. Sure. And this pruning allows for the motor to begin to develop. And as the motor develops, then the sensory and the motor start to integrate. That's why those primal reflexes are so important in integrating the motor and sensory. And then over time, we get more and more in control of maneuvering this physical body we have. But the reality is we're a spirit operating inside of a physical body.
Love that.
And with these guys, go ahead. Sorry.
No. You go ahead.
Well, I was going to say with these guys, because they're taking in so much information and it's overwhelming them, and they don't have the motor development. So essentially the vestibular system, which is what tells you where you are in space, that doesn't develop. And the proprioceptive system is what tells you how much force to use. And that doesn't, if it's not getting the correct information from the vestibular system, then it can't function properly. So then it doesn't function well. So this is why some are considered aggressive and some are considered lazy. And we put these behavior labels on them when really what we're talking about is a proprioceptive system that has no idea how much force it's using.
Sure.
And Houston was wearing this cross once. It's like a big, heavy, like copper cross, and he loved it. And he had a spelling coach who asked him, "Why do you love that cross so much?" And he said, "It's representative of my Savior, but also I can feel where my chest is."
Yeah.
I'm like, I mean, and he would like stand on a vibrating plate, and he loves the vibrating plate. And he said, well, he can feel his whole body. And he said, and I can also feel where my organs are. And I can't even imagine, like, we know where our stomach is, right? Like we have a sense of where it is. They're more like this. This is what happens is they operate because they don't have that connection, the physical motor neural pathway connection to their physical body. So they start operating in their etheric body, which is our spiritual body. And that's where the telepathy and all these other things come in. It's from being way more connected to that and having to rely on that spiritual body as opposed to the physical one.
I wonder what the connection is between that and those who have a low tolerance seems like such a rudimentary caveman phrase to make my point, but a low tolerance for pain or the absence of one's ability to absorb pain, which comes with the spectrum
yes.
as well.
So they tend
That's
to
correct.
have, yes. In fact, there's one of the studies that I found that actually noticed that they had less dense nerve fibers. So essentially less nerve fibers to actually take in the information.
Wow.
And so there are multiple levels to that. If you don't have as many nerve fibers, or if they're not able to receive as much information, then number one, you're going to be able to tolerate more pain. The other thing is the stimuli coming in isn't perceived the same way. It's called something called noxious or nociceptive stimuli. And so, like, to you and I, a hot shower sounds amazing, right? That's incredible. Like, you could just stand there all day, right?
Yes.
Houston said it felt like hot needles poking him in the scalp, and he hated, like, he was terrible.
It's so, because Elijah would be, sensitive to one sensation, but especially when he was smaller, have a limited sensation or realization of anything. Like when it comes to pain, then it's so funny. We go to the movies each week. We just went to see the movie Novocaine. And the main character has a condition, and I think I've answered my question. I was like, I wonder if that's a real thing where he feels none at all. And I forgot about the connection on the spectrum that makes that difficult. So let's go from spelling to telepathy.
Well, hold on a second before I get
there.
Katie, as you're doing this research and you're having these discoveries with Houston, did you feel like you were the only person going through this? And how did you discover that other people were having similar experiences? How did that transition happen? And then we'll talk about, because I think that will lead to the telepathy tapes to some degree.
And real quick, I also want to just mention, because you were asking about the device, and I just wanted to say that the more rudimentary, the less technology, the better, because those devices are using Wi-Fi. They have energy. So we want to reduce, that's more noise to them. So we want the least amount of noise possible, and we want the biggest target possible too, because their gross motor is so challenged. So
this is why I'm so blessed and thankful that we have this show. As recent as last week, maybe the week before, for the first time, I found myself really observing that, because Elijah has a habit where he'll not only maybe cover his ears, which we know comes with the spectrum, but he'll take especially when he's wearing his suit, he'll take it and kind of cover his ears. And I've always noticed that it's related to noise around him. But I noticed last week or the week before that he's doing it at a time where there's no obvious noise whatsoever. And I never noticed that in 18 years of his life before, that it's not always associated with noise. And I find myself going, wonder why he's doing that when there's no noise. And then I even told him, well, you don't have to do that. And like, oh, what a stupid thing to even say. I don't know why he's doing it. So how dare I tell him that he doesn't have to? And everything that we just discussed in the last 60 seconds or less tells you that. I feel horrible for saying this. But
well, don't feel bad.
You don't know what I don't know what his antenna is picking up. So why should I?
Exactly right.
You don't have to do that.
Yep.
And I said Houston was doing the same thing. There was absolutely no sound in the house. I'm like, well, you don't have to do that. Literally, same words. There's no noise. And he said, to you, there's not. And I was like, oh no.
Right.
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 But
that's the thing. He can't tell me that. I'd be like, why are you doing? Are you hearing something? And he can't necessarily explain that.
And it may not be hearing. It may be just ingesting the energy.
Yeah.
And, I mean, there are guys that used to be like, there's probably still a lot of people that do this, but maybe not as many. But when radio was such a big thing, there were, these people that were like radio hounds, right? And they would go and like try to find all these fine frequencies, and they would be able to, that was actually how the big scandal with, the Prince of Wales about his affair was found out through somebody like tuning in to some radio frequency and hearing a conversation. It's crazy, right?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But so so yes, they're taking in far more. And, all of our homes have Wi-Fi now, all of our phones are picking up signals. That information's coming in constantly, but because we can't hear it, we make the assumption that they can't hear it either. And that's a false assumption.
Yeah.
And we have to recognize that what they are absorbing is different than what we are experiencing, and have the humility to appreciate that they are having a different experience than we are. So our observation of them should not be based on what we're observing and what we're experiencing. It should be based on trying to give them an opportunity so they can communicate to us what is actually going on.
Yeah, which is what I say, but in this instance, done a horrible job of, which is being more childlike than childish and try to get in their shoes. Go ahead.
Well, and they're extremely sensitive to, not just the EMFs and the Wi-Fi, but also geomagnetic, changes in energy.
Sure.
So that's a whole nother issue, is the energies that all of nature can feel and adjust and, shifts to, but we don't. We act like it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Right.
But they can. Our kids can.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you were asking about how did I find out if other people were experiencing this?
And I think a lot of parents feel like they're on an island. They have this child, and they don't know, are they the only ones doing it, and how do they?
At this point in terms of chronology, we haven't gone from typing to telepathy yet. So let's touch on.
Yes, I'll tell that real quick.
Yeah.
I'll do it really
then
quick.
You're wondering if you're alone. Yeah.
So he begins spelling the first, independent words were IMINHERE. My soul just exploded in hope.
Yeah.
And then I was this ravenous, he called me a beast, but I was just like, I have to know my son, right? Like I could not get enough. And
because up to this point, you had lost hope too.
Yes. And so
generally
we're just getting totally, like before that, I absolutely had. And then, so he's pouring out all this information. I ran out of lessons. So then I start just using my own knowledge or whatever that day in history was, or anything I could to make a lesson. And it just seemed, it was like endless, all this information coming from him. And I'm like, wait, how do you know all this? And I'm bragging to everybody. Look what he knows. This is what he spelled out today. This is what he spelled out today. And my son was one of my other sons was being cruel and not believing, and was basically, there's no way he could know all this. There's no way he's smart. And I would kicked him out of the room. And I said, Houston, I don't have any idea how you know all this information. And this is the funny thing. I said, do you just have really good hearing? And he goes, I am special. And of course I'm thinking, of course you are, right? Like, duh. And he said, I can hear thoughts. And of course my first reaction was to not believe it, because that seemed unbelievable.
Right.
And then I immediately start testing him, and he was just, the very first thing I asked was, what am I thinking? And I was thinking about my son that I kicked out of the room, that he is mean. And so Houston spelled that out. I was like,
it would be odd enough if he said, you're thinking about my brother, right? But he said the word because
the words. And
so
so then we proceeded, and this all happened, y'all, within 10 minutes time. I went from having no idea to my life being completely turned upside down, not just about what Houston's, was capable of, but to the implications of that. That night, after I realized all this, I suddenly had the realization, oh my word, that means thoughts are things. That means thought matters.
That's what I took away from it. It completely blew my mind in the idea, because it's been said before. I've heard that they've measured how the strength of a positive thought versus a negative one. Don't even necessarily know how, but to think that thoughts are tangible things that you can touch, feel, and have energy and weight.
Yeah.
That's not. That's
Well, and they actually do exactly what we think. Like if we think negatively, they actually produce negative chemicals in us, and the actual mechanisms of the, cellular system start carrying out negativity. It releases negative chemicals, negative hormones. It starts destroying cells. And this is why you see happy people that like look really youthful, right? Because it literally changes their body chemistry. But the other thing it does, and this is what I get into in our story, is the actual mechanisms of that from a mathematical perspective and what that really means. But essentially what it means is exactly what the Bible tells us, is that we are our thoughts, that all things are possible for the one who believes, that faith is an act of creation and doubt is an act of destruction. And the person who prays and doubts should not think that they're going to get anything, because they are like a wave tossed to and fro. Like it literally prevents. So one of the other things Houston said to me that was so hurtful but true was, this was early on, and he had a lot of anger, rightly so. And he said to me, all your thoughts are rotten. And that was like a knife to my heart.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, I'm doing everything for everybody, for you, I've literally done nothing for myself, and you're going to say all my thoughts are rotten. And he was angry when he made that statement, but he went on later and he said, when I said that, I'm talking about your faith. He said, you literally destroy your prayers with your doubt.
Wow.
Hold up. Two things. And I've been holding back from before when you reference the Bible. For anybody listening that thinks that that's a Christian statement or a religious statement, I want that you to do yourself a favor and do away with that thought, because you're stating what's in the Bible as it relates to belief. It doesn't matter what the book is. And then when you're talking about Houston's words, that observation is so ridiculously profound. It's the equivalent of drinking poison and expecting to be the picture of health.
Yes. Well, and it's funny because you don't, basically the Bible says what quantum mechanics, is trying to prove. So, whatever, quantum mechanics confirms what the Bible says. So, that you can make your own inferences to what that means about the Bible. That's, everybody's, journey.
Right. I just know people will get caught up on that and totally miss the point. And I'm trying to do them a favor by saying,
they should.
Don't do that.
And in fact, this is a good time, Katie. Let me just say this. This is for a shameless plug. So for people who want to read more in depth about Katie's story and Houston's story, and faith, and the lack of faith, and then the finding faith, and getting that restored. Her book is The Book of Heaven by K&H Asher.
Yes. I got one right here. I'll show it. Here's a picture.
There it is. Okay, good. There it is. The Book of Heaven, and she goes into great detail about where it starts, what happened in her own childhood that had her, have faith, lose faith, regain faith, and all of this. And so, even though we mentioned Christianity a lot, it's really the principles in the Bible and in the books of faith that a lot of this discovery is affirmed. I should say reaffirmed, but it's affirmed.
And my thought is, because whenever that whole conversation happened, I was not believing. Like, that's why Houston said what he said.
Yeah.
So that was your go-to.
That was, in fact, my opinion, and it was how I was raised in this culture, not specifically by any particular person, but in our culture, doubt is considered intelligent. Doubt is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to have evidence. You're not supposed to believe something just, you're considered foolish, childish, simple-minded. The smart people doubt, skeptical, they're critical, they withhold believing. To believe something you can't see or prove was considered foolish. So I thought I was being smart. And that was my framework for everything. What I didn't realize was that there was just as much proof or evidence that my thoughts had power, and they had the power to bring good and despair, to be creative and destructive. They had faith and doubt are the same thing, just which way are you going?
Right. Two sides of the same coin. Yeah.
Same coin. Yeah. There you go.
So I mean, go to Amazon, get the Book of Heaven. It's fascinating. You're gonna hear a lot of what we've talked about today, but from the beginnings. So the Book of Heaven by Ky Dickens.
With a lot of crying in between.
I will say there's a couple of moments I felt in my heart what you were going through as you explained it. Spectacular book. All right. So
yes, as I start figuring this out, I made a call to my one friend and I was like, I don't even know how to say this, but does your son hear thoughts? And she goes, oh, wow, you're going really fast. I was like, what does that mean?
Yeah. What does that mean? Yeah.
It just meant that we had progressed to open communication, that I could figure that out very quickly. Spelling takes a long time to develop those motor pathways, open up. If you're an individual who's been trapped in your body and you have never shared your story, it's not like it just opens up and you share it. Like there's a lot of emotional trauma and baggage, and do I trust them? They've doubted me my whole life. Do I really trust them to share my story, my heart? What if I need these people for everything? What if I tell them I'm mad at them? Right? Like there's a lot to unpack. And
so she had been there, but just never shared it.
Right. And so anyway, so she confirmed it. And then how great that capacity was. Houston was always kind of sharing a little bit, kind of testing me to see how I was going to react to it. And then a little bit more. And so I didn't get to know everything all at once. That's not how it happened.
Can you just quickly share the story about the I don't know if it was a towel that you pulled out of the wash and you immediately went out and threw it away?
Yes.
Do you remember?
Yes, I do.
Really quickly.
Yeah. So when Houston was,
I feel like it's the beginning of this.
Oh my goodness, yes. So, so this actually kind of started with the stones, right? With the stones, and he explained to me. So someone had given me these stones, right? And they prayed a prayer from Acts, from the book of Acts on these. And I'm like, I literally took the bag and I'm like, what on earth? And I said, I took it like you would take a joint at a party. I knew I was supposed to be grateful, but I didn't know what to do with it. I'm like, what do I do with this? So I took it to my bathroom and I took them out of the bag. I had my bedroom and bathroom door both closed. And so all of a sudden, Houston, I heard the bedroom door slam open, then the bathroom door slams open, and he starts screaming, like not screaming, but like loudly demanding, stones, stones, stones. And I was like, what? Here, take them. I didn't know why or what. And so he explained to me that when you're autistic, that you're a magnet for all energy, good and bad. And he said, these stones have good energy. And she had prayed that prayer over them. And he said, I need more good energy. And I'm like an idiot. Where's the bad energy? So he starts listing it all, right? And I was like,
it's all you.
Oh my word. Like basically I have to get rid of everything. So I did. I just started getting rid of everything. And there was, in that whole process, there was just all these different things going on, but there was this towel that had come from not a pleasant moment in my life. And I put it in the wash and everything else. And I took it out and all of a sudden I looked at it and I realized that it had all this negative energy and I could feel it. I knew it. And I just instinctively went and I took it and I threw it in the trash along with many other things. And it was the beginning of me kind of not being logical, but instead being intuitive. Like
Right.
anyone else would look at the towel and go, that's ridiculous. It's a towel. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But I knew in my heart that there was something on it. And I was just going to start leaning into when my spirit was speaking to me and being that intuitive person, that I have that ability, but we've cut that off. Like animals are instinctual, right? They're constantly, they respond to their instincts, which is why their instincts are so strong and why they can detect even the tiniest thing and react to it. They don't beat themselves up. They don't demand proof for their instinct, right? they act.
Right.
And
It's
so,
funny.
but we're, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, you
But
go ahead. You go ahead. I'll say that.
it was just that was the beginning of me starting to be basically honoring my spirit and listening to it and honoring what it's telling me and acting upon it. And I don't have to give anybody a reason why. I don't have to explain myself. I'm going to honor what my spirit is saying to me. And if my instinct says this is an unsafe situation, or this is an unsafe person, or this is a good situation and you should feel encouraged to go and help this person, then I'm going to start following that and listening to it and being open to it. And really, wouldn't that be amazing if we all started doing that? And like,
I try and do that. You know, it's interesting because I tried to, and this is the silliest thing, the fact that I tried to figure out why. I was like, a fly is smaller than the brain of most living things, yet a fly knows to move away and avoid your hand if you attempt to swat at it, right? There's some instances where it seems like an animal might not do that. But then the other thing is, like, we're so trained to try and make sense. If you think about that, those words, that almost is counterproductive. Making sense meaning sounds like you're creating a narrative to fit your situation or thought, right? So why make sense when it would make more sense to feel sense?
you just hit on something super important. And I love telling the story, but Houston, one time I was showing him this video of these guys like our age. A song had come on and they jumped into the driveway and they started doing the dance that they had performed at their 1989 homecoming. And it was fabulous because it was the 80s. Okay, so so anyway, I showed it to Houston thinking he would be like, oh wow, y'all were good, or something, like comment about the dancing. And he said, this shows what autistics already know. And I'm like, oh, great. What am I going to learn today? He said, memories are held in the body. Prayers are held in the heart. Knowledge is held in the mind. The mind likes to think it's the ruler of all three, but really these are three separate rulers in one body. And what you were just talking about was the being, right? The knowing, and that competing with the mind, which is trying to rationalize everything. And we don't have to let the mind have all that power. We can actually, operate on more of a being, loving, instinctual level. And we should.
Yeah. I'm going to say one thing from a logistical perspective here. We're going to go long.
Oh dear.
But because it's okay, because we're not going live. We're recording interviews. Are you okay with
hold on one second, let me
I'm going to do this.
yes.
Okay, so we're back, and we're ready to go. We're going to go a little long on this episode. That was the agreement that we had. We're going to go get a little long. Stay with us because the value here is amazing. And if you're as fascinated by this as we are, remember, we're hosts of this podcast, but we're also fascinated as audience members too. So we've been engaged, in conversation with Katie for a little while, and there's just so much more great stuff to hang in there with us. So back to the mind, body, heart, and which
memories are. Memories versus faith.
And memories are in the body. And, a lot of these concepts, I think, they're super important from a scientific perspective for them to really start recognizing that, well, first of all, that reality is truly much stranger than we have ever thought. And, that it's actually incredible. And there's a poetic connection to all life. That we're going to have to reject the materialistic model because there's no way it can incorporate everything. Clearly, not everything that is real can be measured, can be observed and measured. So we have to reject that model. That doesn't mean there weren't valuable things in it. There are some things we can measure, but we can't measure everything. And the other thing is, like, also we have to understand, like, what is the source? So materialists like to think that we came from nothing and that, suddenly everything came from nothing, right? That's and the only thing that's real is what can be measured. And so there's some major flaws with that.
Kate, if you will, to just talk about, and we could have a whole episode on this too, because this is new to me too, as a result of everything we've been learning from you over the past couple of weeks, especially. But you mentioned materialists.
I was just
for those that don't know, tell them what materialists are.
Okay, so materialism actually found its roots. I mean, you can actually look back even further, but I would say as an intentional philosophical idea, it began around 700 AD in India and progressed through the intellectual circles, and had an enormous influence on what we call the Enlightenment, which then produced the Age of Reason. And I like to refer to the Enlightenment as the enlimitment. Right? Right. Really what it did was it put us as human beings as we are we have basically self-determined that we determine truth. And that nothing's true unless we say it's true. Unless we observe it's true, right? But we can look at other animals that can observe more than we. I mean, clearly bats observe more than we do. Dogs observe more than we do. Like, all the animal creatures observe more than we do. So when I say the enlimitment, I'd like to refer to that as when man decided that the only thing that was real was the 4% that we could measure with whatever instruments we had available.
Right.
And it really just puts the human reason as the limits of truth. And I'd say that is flawed. There are many reasons it's flawed. But fundamentally, the problem with materialism is that everything actually comes from spirit. And I don't say that mildly at all. Like, that was the whole thing that I realized whenever Houston began to said, he can hear thoughts. And I realized thought is a thing. And now, if thought is a thing, that means it's energy, right? And the very first law of energy is the law of conservation, which says that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred. So here we are having this thought, and it's transferring, it's becoming a thing. And that's when I, had that, someone had taught me this concept years earlier, back when Houston said the mama, I love you. That's when I had actually first learned this concept. But what someone said to me was, take anything around you, look on your desk. And remember, we did this in our last interview, and I remember, and I said, what was it before it was, the cup or the pencil or whatever? And it was a thought.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is a thought before it becomes a thing. And so our thoughts are creating. So for a materialist to say it's not real unless we can measure it, and thoughts aren't real, things in your head that we can't see aren't real, it flips it all upside down, and it says the thought, the spirit, is the source of the matter.
And it's
in fact, matter is matter is the slowest moving, densest form of energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was going to make a statement that I made before, which is probably a question. The statement I made before, which is that every single thing, everything before our eyes, started someplace behind someone else's eyes. But more important than the statement is the question. Think of one thing, or give one example of a person, place, or thing in front of our eyes that did not begin behind someone else's eyes.
Right.
And there's nothing. And when you hear that, that sounds like, oh, that just makes all the sense in the world. Yet we've been indoctrinated with everything that says otherwise, which doesn't make much sense.
And in fact, anything outside of what's measurable is discounted, and anybody who professes to have any kind of capability outside of what's measured, they're written off as charlatans or frauds or fake science or whatever, and completely given no validity, right?
As because we forget that we know more than we know.
Yeah.
Right.
Because we know more than or we know more than we think we know.
Well, that's absolutely right. And you were just, remember when you talked about the fly, right? Sensing and moving and reacting when we haven't even moved yet. It's like it instinctively knows which way we're going to try to swat at it.
Right.
How does it know that?
No. Yeah.
Not that smart. How is that possible?
Yeah. Right.
Fish who swim in schools and birds that fly together as one mind.
Yeah.
How's that all happen?
Right. And I mean, so we are all connected, and that's the reality, is that all of life is connected. And if I was going to, I feel like right now is such a pivotal time in human history, because I feel like we're trying to replace all the incredible abilities that we have naturally that we have never really developed with machines.
Right.
Right. AI, like that's a machine to do what we could actually be doing ourselves, and
we live in the noisiest time ever, mentally speaking. Yeah.
And I would love for us to, get back to nature, to get back to the earth, to get back to that knowing, that intuitive nature. Even Dr. Eben Alexander, I'll show you. This is his book. It was Proof of Heaven.
Oh, Proof of Heaven.
He experienced some of that knowing. He's a neuroscientist who essentially had encephalopathy from hepatitis or something, or I'm probably using the wrong disease that attacked him, but something attacked his brain and he was essentially brain dead and experienced this incredible supernatural event with such intensity that was more real than reality, right? And of course, in that, it was like one of these near-death experiences, and they were actually able to measure his brain waves that, during that whole time he was in the hospital, and his brain was not acting at all. So it's clearly something else was alive and experiencing all this, because his brain had zero activity. Wow. But before all of that happens, he talks about this experience of skydiving, and someone below him, he was an experienced skydiver, and someone who was in their formation was not as experienced and made a flaw in their, which would have resulted in him catapulting into that person and both of them dying. And what happened was mid-air, he reacted before the event happened. And there would have been no way for him to have react to the event in time for him to save his life. Wow. And his body reacted before the event happened. And that's kind of like the fly that moves before we swat on it, right? Wow. There's this knowing. And so I do think that there's way more to us. There's way more to the experience that we call life. And there's way more to us as our nature. And it's okay to realize that we got some stuff wrong and that we need to humbly admit that there's some things we don't know, and we should be open to learning.
Well, I love the fact that in some of the discussions about, realists, materialists trying to prove some of the things that our non-speaking, kids can do now. It's funny. I love the response that one of the autistic kids said is like, do you measure love? Well, why do you need to measure this? If there's enough proof out there that this exists, why do you need to measure it? Why do we need to measure it to make it so to you? Yeah. And do you measure love? Love is an emotion that makes us do things. Is that being measured? That's one that everybody experiences. That's not being measured. Seems. So, anyways,
Houston said about love. He said scientists want to measure the thing that created it, but he said, but they're unwilling to love. Because love is what created life. And he
Right.
said, so
There
there
you
they
go.
want to measure it, but they're not willing to receive it.
Well, it's funny in goal setting, they say that why is so much more important than how. If your why is great enough, you'll figure out how. And that's where why has tremendous value. Where why becomes overvalued is in everything here that we're talking about, because we need to know. And that's where I struggle with it because of my level of curiosity. Is like, no, I need to know why that's taking place. You don't always have to know why.
You don't.
Does it really matter? Does it really matter? It doesn't always matter.
Hold on 1 second.
This is
Going back. Go to your room, okay? Yeah, go ahead. Go in and lay down on your bed, okay?
McDonald's, yes.
Not McDonald's, no. Go ahead and lay down, okay? Right, go
Well, I'm
ahead.
not the only one that gets cornered from McDonald's. Okay, good.
Gosh, every day. We've already been. Just so you know.
I'm in. I'm going. I'm going today. I love McDonald's. Terrible. Screw that.
So,
We're trying to wean off it.
so, well, I get my coffee there, so I take him for breakfast. So
There you go.
That's our daily
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
I'm gonna.
You know what?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I wanted to touch on something. Generally speaking, again, this is just we're talking about experiences and value and everything. But I wanted Katie to talk about. She made a post about a week ago, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I just felt like so many things just like, hit me in the chest and I can relate. And that is public restrooms. Because when Elijah was small, you know, my wife Laura could take him into the women's restroom. Oh gosh, I feel like real anxiety just bringing
No,
up
I
the
know.
subject.
I'm having the anxiety right now just with you talking about it.
Yeah, which means that it's worth talking about. I feel like I'm having trouble breathing. Literally, it's so weird. You know, I think it's because I'm talking to you too, not just the subject. The connection has something to do with it too. But when he was small, she could take him into the restroom, the women's restroom, and he was cute. And so the problem that we might have later on, we didn't even know about. But now, you know, what happens with him is he has to flush every toilet. He doesn't do the picture thing anymore, but I'm never completely at rest that there's only going to be understanding individuals in the restroom. So what I do is if he's going into a gender neutral bathroom that has like one toilet, no stalls or whatever have you, he can be in there alone. Good. I let him go in there. If it's one where there's individual stalls, I never let him in there alone. He goes in there, but I wait for him and have to explain to people he's waiting for it because he'll want to use the biggest stall.
Yeah.
It's all habit and you just don't know what you're going to get. Share, if you will, which I'm sure many people can relate to, your experience with the bathroom recently.
With public restrooms. This is going to
Yeah.
be doozy. So we've had multiple experiences with the public restroom issue, and both with him going into a men's restroom as well as me taking him into the women's restroom. And apparently the public doesn't like either one. So
and let me just touch on one thing too. In my case, like I said, my wife and I are married. We're a team. He can no longer go into the women's restroom. We go out and about. I take him into the men's. She doesn't go anywhere with him on outings where it's not curbside pickup because she doesn't have that luxury as you don't. So go ahead.
Right. And so, but because there is only me, that would mean I would never be able to go anywhere or do anything. And that's not realistic. And so, because he would go stir crazy. So we do go places and he has to go to the restroom and he really wants to use the men's restroom, which unfortunately, either I've had multiple situations, one where he went in and came out another entrance and I didn't see that he'd gone out the other entrance and went and got on a computer and everyone was just absolutely in arms because I wasn't watching him. I was literally standing at the door waiting for him to come out and they were screaming at me. Then another time he went in a restroom and he's just, standing, rocking back and forth. And he looks over somebody, in the stall and somebody raged on him and was literally going to just strangle him. And then we've had, of course, the women who don't want him in there and several different episodes of that. But basically, we're not wanted anywhere. And even if you have the beauty of having a gender neutral single stall bathroom, which is ideal, let's just be honest. Men like to go in there and do their business and sit in there for an hour and occupy the thing and not be respectful that there might actually be people who are a family who need it,
Yeah.
And but basically, it's just selfishness is really what we're talking about, is that people are more concerned about their needs than being sensitive to the fact that there are people with greater needs. And that maybe this would be a moment in time where you put aside what you prefer to help someone who desperately needs some grace and needs some leniency and needs some opportunity to navigate in a world that's not built for them.
And we've been lucky. We have one instance where he did a curbside pickup, and he had an item. I think it was like a sports drink bottle, and he wanted to throw it out. And I was like, okay, the trash can is right there. So we pull up to the parking space. The trash can is behind the car. So he goes behind the car, like just crossing the little walkway to throw it out. I look, and my only concern is him crossing back over to get to the car, right? But I look up at the trash can, he's there, put my head down, look up at the trash can, he's nowhere in sight. Just like some TV movie where a kid gets snatched. And I'm like, what the And I turn the car off, and I get up and I go, and he's not there. And it's a warehouse store. So I go to the door, and I'm trying to think, he doesn't have a membership card. How the heck did he even get in? What is with these people, right? Yeah. This is when you want somebody to harass him or at least have a conversation. Right. So I go to the door, and I'm like, I'm looking for my son. He's but this big blah blah blah. I said, oh yeah, he asked where the restroom was. We told him it's that way. He's like, you just told him he doesn't have a membership card? So I went, and he happened to have went way past the registers and everything, went into the restroom, and moments like that are when I believe, like, okay, there's more to us than this, and we're kind of washed over, because we've had like a couple of instances like that, not many, but they each are so poignant, where it's like just a little bit of a change of the pebble in the stream, and the outcome could have been significantly different.
And yes, there have been so many situations. I've felt there were countless times where Houston and myself should be dead. Like, for real. Like, I'm not exaggerating. There are many circumstances where we should not be alive, and yet we are.
Yeah.
And that, kind of goes to that there is something more happening. There is a greater purpose. And we all have these moments where we experience that there's something more, but we all try to rationalize it, or we just don't share it. We keep it to ourselves. And I would love for us to be, let's just recognize as a world that there's more. Then talk about it.
Absolutely. I have, and just to bring it down for those who haven't experienced this with, a family member with autism, we all have those moments where, and I know it's been talked about in the tapes, but where we're walking out of the room, we feel that somebody's staring at us. And so we feel that there's something more there. This morning I woke up, I think I shared earlier off camera. I woke up at 7:40 thinking I've got to call my daughter who's in Israel. And I get to brush my teeth and, take a shower, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, I got to go grab the phone. And at 7:39, she had sent me a text saying, hey, Dad, are you up? Which is, like those kinds of things, what we're used to, because materialism is going, oh, how funny coincidence. Isn't that weird? But yet now if you start to talk about it and accept that it's part of something more, now you're going to hear, because everybody has stories about that. Oh, I was just thinking about this person, and then they called, or just thinking about this person, and then, I got an email from them. Like,
we overlook it.
And by the way, to the point earlier about machines, sometimes we'll say something out loud, and then isn't that weird? Now I'm getting an ad for that product when I was talking about it, because the machines are trying to replicate what's already natural to us that we've discounted. Like, we've
exactly,
that and going,
and that's what I was talking about.
This is funny. Sometimes when it happens, I tend to wonder, was it the machine? Was it the algorithm? Or was it
Yeah.
that other
So
thing?
and this is where the machines are trying to replicate what we naturally as human beings, our minds are absolutely just incredible, but it's not just our minds, our spirit, our physical body, and the way that all three are knit together are absolutely incredible. And I mean, they're miraculous actually. And they have an eternal nature, not just a limited finite nature. And there's the memory, right? Even in the body, that even though the body's finite, that the body has memory. And this is where I think actually the concept of reincarnation comes, because like these Kys are really open to everything in their lineage, because they're open to everything. And so that whole thing about Houston and the said, oh, with the dancers, right? And they did that dance. But so that was like their body immediately knew it, right? Their body, they didn't think about it. Their body just did it. It had the memory. And there's like, and there's, stories of people who've had organ donations where they start getting the memories of the people,
of the donor.
Yeah.
That's wild.
And so,
it's funny. I had, I tore my ACL maybe more than 20 years ago playing basketball. And when I was going to have surgery, first of all, I rolling your ankle is a common injury in basketball. Your knee, not so much. So when I had the injury, the guys I was playing with, they're like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, I'm not sure. Try to play, and then a week later, couldn't. Doctor took a look at it, did the MRI, came back and said, your meniscus is torn, and so is your ACL. But the ACL, I can't tell if it's completely torn or partially torn because the meniscus is someplace where it's not supposed to be, so it's blocking it.
wow.
I'll know when we go in. We can do one of two things. We can do a graft from your hamstring or a cadaver. And instinctively, I was like, F the cadaver. There's no way. What if that person, and I should think about this. I said, I said to myself, what if that person had some, was like some closet crackhead or had, suicidal tendencies or homicidal tendencies. And I just acquire that. And I half thought it was stupid. But at the same time,
I don't think it's stupid at all. I was just talking to a doctor who was relaying another story from another doctor who had done some like the fecal transplant, and that someone who received one of those had suddenly started devouring oranges. And that's, so we're just talking about biome, right? That's it, just the biome. And the donor was like addicted to oranges. And so there's just so much more to us. But I think because these guys don't have that veil, that filter, that, and like, because they're so open to everything, they're basically absorbing everything from anyone in their past. And the thing about memory is our memories are sensory and motor. That's what memories are. They're a collection of sensory and motor that we either observe or do. And that's what they are. And so it makes sense that they would imprint energy onto the genetic matter that could be transferred.
Sure.
Let me ask you.
And wait, hold on. Just going back to a basic example of that is sometimes you'll hear a song that you heard on vacation when you were in your teens, and your recollection of that experience comes through when you hear the song on the radio.
That's exactly right.
That's
and the same reactions within your body.
You feel it. You feel
and
it. I can smell the beach when I hear certain songs that I had listened to in the 70s, when I was on.
You smell a smell of something that is nowhere near you.
Totally.
And you start feeling all the emotions that come with the smell.
You know what I've experienced lately is like, it's one thing to think of a song, and it takes you back and you can smell that smell. Oh, I can smell it now. I've had things where, and this can be a pleasant smell or unpleasant smell. Maybe the dog's gone in the house or something like that. And it's such a horrible smell. And like a day later, I have like what I call like scent paranoia. I'll be like, I swear I smelled that thing and it's nowhere around. And I'm taken back to it.
I have that. In Houston, because he had the fecal smearing and everything, when I realized that if I smelled the fecal matter, like I was immediately angry, even though nothing had happened. Like, I mean, I was like, how am I like instantly experiencing that emotion just from a smell, And so we're so intricately knit, right?
Yeah.
And there was in the book I actually talk about this. Anyone can see it on YouTube. But this prima ballerina from 1965, New York City Ballet. She had Alzheimer's. This is like current day.
Oh, yeah.
She had
See that.
Alzheimer's and didn't remember who she was. And so they put Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake on her ears. And she's in her wheelchair, humped over, and they put these headphones on her, and they were playing the video of her dancing this in 1965. And suddenly, at the exact same time of the music and in the video, she starts reaching out and performing in her wheelchair, and her body remembered. And then she got the memory back, and then she remembered who she was.
Oh my gosh.
And I know, right?
That's so
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Nice. Well,
And so
and by the way, yeah, listen, I love this. The thing about this is that it brings all of this that we've been talking about. It's relatable and accessible. Now people are thinking, oh yeah, that's happened. I've seen that. I've had those. This is why we want to have these conversations, because we want to talk about these things to make it so people go, yes, let's not discount these things. And so, with all of that, I want to get to the telepathy tapes and your involvement in that. And we're trying to limit the time a little bit here, just a bit of courtesy. But I was thinking as we get there that it feels like the future of where this is all going is maybe that there's a way to access, folks who have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia.
That's what I was.
Is there a way to make the connection here?
Yes.
That's what I was going to ask you. We have a bi-weekly call for our men's group called the Den, and the idea of there being more to us than we realize was part of the conversation. So we discussed mindfulness and meditation and the telepathy tapes. So I want you to talk to us about how you got introduced to that. But then the other thing I'm thinking, for anyone that's listening, including myself, right, that says, I want to sharpen, quote unquote, my antenna. What suggestions might you give for one's ability to try and do that?
That's a lot in there.
It is a lot.
Good luck.
And I will tell you that, so first of all, for the dementia and the Alzheimer's and things like that, Houston, I remember getting into, he was kind of aggressive. He serves on this board, and which is about alternatives to guardianship. And an attorney had come on and they were talking about guardianship for the elderly, right? And as if this was just this thing that had to happen. Of course, they should just have their rights taken away. And Houston was adamant. He was like, they are in there. And he's like, and he just kept saying, well, no, because they're showing. And he's like, no, their motor is showing. They're not showing you. It's their motor. Their motor has been inhibited. And he just constantly kept just drilling that into that they were still there. They were still, it's just that what we were observing was what was incapacitated. My
grandmother used to say, I'm a beautiful picture just with a broken frame.
Yeah. And I think that Ky was actually, I'm not sure if it's come out yet, but I do know she was talking to one of the non-speakers who has that, essentially that gift that he's really working on trying to help with the Alzheimer's and dementia patients. So that's kind of his focus. So I do think there's a lot of opportunity, and, I think we've got to stop putting limits on what's possible. There are not limits. Yeah. And so what we need to see, instead of, oh, you get this diagnosis, this is your course, this is it, this is all. No. Okay, yeah, so this thing has presented itself. This is now an opportunity to let's believe in something extraordinary. Let's believe in the impossible. Let's find a way. And I think that's where we need to shift in our thinking, from this fatalistic, materialist perspective to this limitless, where anything is possible.
Yeah.
And so, whenever you realize, again, with, what telepathy proves is that we're all connected, that we are far more than our bodies and even the limits of our mind, that we're far greater than that, and that our thoughts have power, and that we need to be using our thoughts for good. And that's really, like, if I could sum up everything, that's what I think we need to take from it.
Yeah.
And so, to that point, like, we need to, what's next? And how do we start to harness this for ourselves? Well, we need to connect to the earth. We need to connect to nature. And
Mm-hmm.
that, remember I was talking about that intuitiveness where you feel something, when the more you act on it, the bigger it gets. It gets so strong. If you
That's how
say
the
yes
antenna
to
gets
it,
sharpened, so to speak.
mhm.
Listen to it. Let me
If
ask
you
you.
don't listen
I don't.
to it, yeah, you're never
Yeah,
going to grow it.
Never
Grow
going to
the
It's
get
like a
skill.
muscle. It's like a
Yes.
muscle.
Yes.
So let me ask you this, and I don't think I've thought of this before. So obviously, Houston communicates with you, or wait a minute, Houston
He hears
can.
me
He hears
perfectly.
you. You don't hear him though.
I do hear him some, but I only hear him when I'm spelling with him. But I do feel him. So like there's some times where I know he's telling me something and I'm feeling it, but it's a knowing.
Yeah.
And it's a strong knowing, and I know where it comes from because
Like you can't again, you can't explain it. There's no why or whatever. You just
Right.
know it's there. Right.
And
Right.
we've all experienced this. Like we know things that we can't go into a court and prove, but we know it with everything in us.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's what I'm talking about. And so it is a knowing, but when I'm spelling with him, I can actually hear words. Not every single time. I will tell you, last night it was really funny. I took him out for St. Patrick's Day for a green beer. And I'm like, I've got to do this, right?
Right? Why not?
So,
That's awesome.
anyway, we're sitting there and they've got a band. It was all 80s music. It was awesome. I was like, okay. And they had shepherd's pie. It was great. And all of a sudden he yells out pool. Like verbally says the word pool. And I'm like,
Wow.
and I'm thinking, pool? Wait a minute. I mean, we're in a bar. And I'm thinking, pool? Well, okay, yes, you got it right. Okay. And I'm like, does he mean bathroom? I'm like totally blowing it. Like the whole thing. I'm like completely, there's too much noise, right? I was like, I failed. Okay. Anyway, so I get the board out and he's like, it was so fast. He was like, pool. I wanted to go play pool in the game room.
Billiard,
and there was no way I heard him in that moment, right? But then we go in, I find the pool table. We were able to, anyway, I just like, there was this just moment of incredible joy that he got to be this guy playing pool in a bar on St. Patrick's Day with a band playing. And like, I felt this like, as if he'd finally gotten to be a man kind of moment for him. And it wasn't because that's not my dream. Okay. But I was, and I could feel it. And I like this sense of satisfaction and peace that came over him and then came over me from this, just this lived, mutual experience together.
Yeah.
And I think the more we start opening ourselves up to that, letting those joys happen, letting those opportunities happen, that those connections between us as human beings become stronger.
For sure. And sometimes
like your daughter this morning, right? With the 739, like that connection is so strong that it was like instantaneous to the two of you.
Yeah. And I just spent 2 weeks with her in Israel, and we have been in, a lot of communication lately. So there was, there's definitely an antenna tuning that had sort of taken place. Yeah. And I think you're right. I think people, do experience this. Like some people have an instant connection and they don't know why, or they feel like they've known that person for a very long time or something, and they don't really know how to explain it. But I took a class. I did for my MBA. My very first class was human behavior in organizations, and our professor taught us to go beyond that which is proven. And we were doing things like, because as a manager, sometimes you have to follow your intuition. You get a feel for somebody if they're going to fit with the organization. The culture's right. And we learned all of this stuff. Telepathic transportation. All of these kinds of things, making decisions by Tao. All of these kinds of things, because there's more to it than what we are able to prove. And that connection between us is, the more we squash those feelings of knowledge and intuition, the more we're shortchanging our opportunity for experiencing more. Like we really need to tune in and see the miracles for what they are. Truly,
shortchanging humanity, really,
right. And the and I actually shared this on. I was doing another podcast, and they and I had just heard this, but that hair is like human antenna, right? And they were talking about, that there were used to be soldiers, and they wanted to use them as scouts, right? And then they become part of the army. They have shave their hair, and then their scouting ability, their detection ability wasn't as strong whenever they had their head shaved.
Samson and Delilah from the Bible, right?
Yes, I know.
This is power. Sorry, Sean. You're beautiful, Sean, and you're very powerful, Sean. So.
That's okay. I know. I keep it this way. It's just still a little something there.
See, Houston saying hi.
Hi.
Yeah, hi, Houston.
So, if you want to sit here, just come sit here.
Yeah, we're almost done. We're wrapping up here very, very shortly.
I'm making a seat for him, so he's gonna hang out with me.
I love it. It's become such in my world. You both have become a powerful force for good.
I just thought of
something.
I'll turn it over. So
Go ahead.
For you guys, it's all about love, and it's interesting because Sean and I, when we end our episodes, Sean always says, "If you hear the sound of my voice, know I love you." And I always say empathy and love, is so important that's what drives everything. Love has been part of our communication since we've met. And I think it's what kind of bonds us together and keeps us together. And you guys just have reinforced love and the meaning of love. See, look at that. I love that right there.
That's what everything's about.
Well, he's trying to sweet talk me. He's trying to get more food.
Oh. That's purpose. That's purpose. That's okay. Katie, you had me just think of something I mentioned earlier, and we usually promote it. We have our men's group, which is known as the Den. It is a support group traditionally for men or dads who are caregivers to those with disabilities or special needs. That could mean an elderly person. That could mean a caregiver in the professional sense. It could mean a family member, whatever the case is. But I never thought of this until now. Don't know how communication would work, but I am formally extending an invitation to attend either as a guest. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So the show's not being broadcast live, but
thank goodness. Okay, so
yeah, okay.
No, I was afraid he'd gotten the phone again, and I was like, because he does this really sneaky thing where he'll be like,
yeah, I love you, Mom.
So I had to make sure.
I know that look. My mom was the other day. We're at my mom's, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, he was looking in the window to see when you weren't looking because we don't want Elijah. He'll go outside to straighten up the trash cans at my mom's, and if nobody's in the backyard, we don't want him to go out there because the pool is right there, and if he falls in the pool, nobody would know, right?
Right.
So he's looking in the window, giving a side eye to make sure I wasn't looking. Then he ran and came back really quick, like I've been here the whole time. But I was going to say, you made me think of something extended to Houston and beyond. I just mentioned the criteria for the people that are members of the Den, but I am extending an invitation to join either as a member potentially or just a guest. I don't know how the communication would work, but the door is open for Houston to join us whenever he may want to, because I've never thought of someone, it's for caregivers, but if someone is on the spectrum as well and able to communicate, get something from the gatherings, who knows what they can get from our ad. Yeah.
Because I think a lot of the times, parents don't know how much their kids understand. They don't know how their actions are interpreted. They also misinterpret their kids' actions, right? We had a constant question, in our groups from parents is, my kid won't spell with me. He'll spell with the practitioner, but he won't spell with me. Well, it's obviously because there's all kinds of, emotional issues. The parents' anxiety for their kid to communicate is and the kid feels it, and it's like, that's too much. I can't, So there's a lot of things that as a non-speaker that Houston could communicate to those caregivers. Most importantly, to not give up hope, because that is what he will just hammer over and over again. Your kid is in there. Do not give up hope.
Yeah.
Well, I'll
And
get you the info so he can hopefully join us on the next one. And
Well, and I think that you guys need to like spread the word far and wide. There's just so much need, especially I think, and I know y'all know this as dads, and this has been part of y'all's mission. Why it's so incredible. I feel like you're bringing compassion back to manhood, which is
Thank
needed,
you.
right? So
Thank you.
needed, and
Yeah.
for them to grieve, for them to be able to have the opportunity to grieve and not feel like it's somehow a flaw, or that they're supposed to still be okay even though their dreams of what they thought their child's life was going to be are very different now, and then to find new joy. And how do you do that? And it's such a lonely place when you can't talk about those things.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
Well, and if anything, and
Exactly.
again, we keep going back to this, the telepathy tapes, that if anything, it's an opportunity for accessing a level of consciousness that without this connection, we may never achieve on our own as, mere mortals. Like we like to have the level of to tap into a level of consciousness. To me, it's actually kind of exciting, because I'm sure for you,
Really?
as your world opened up into all things that are possible. That's one of the messages I got from the telepathy tapes, that and that God is love, right? Forget whatever religion you belong to or you aspire to, you ascribe to. Love is the base of consciousness everywhere, right?
Well,
Everything's created out of love.
He
Let
it's
me
not an attribute, it's who he is. That's
let me ask you this,
Yes.
Katie. I don't know. I presume, because part of the reason why we started the Den was because society doesn't encourage men. Society encourages men to wear bigger masks than women and to wear them more often. Therefore, based on that, I would think that the community within which telepathy takes place, I know that children are of, gender doesn't necessarily matter, but I would imagine it's probably more of a challenge for a man to break down a barrier, or a man has more barriers to break down to enter telepathy or entertain it, possibly. And therefore it's probably twice as important for us to tune into that which is greater than ourselves.
What's interesting is I think that you have that connection between a mother and a child that's extremely strong, where a mother knows, like, oh, I know you're up to something. I don't know what it is. I haven't found it yet, but I know, and I know, and
Right.
I know. And the kid's like, oh
Right.
my gosh, how does she know?
Right. Right.
Right.
Right.
But I think naturally men are incredibly instinctual about environment. They're constantly like the whole protection, right? They see danger. They're very intuitive. They're like, that person's not safe. They're extremely protective. So I do think they have this, these same
It's a different
skill sets.
intuition.
It's different. And so I think the way to go about it is to first develop what you're already a little bit gifted to. So work on that and lean into those, and then and open yourself up to love, because love is the gateway to this ability. Right. And the more you start loving, the more you start taking those masks off, the more you start being honest, the more those pathways are going to be free. I mean, if you think about, because remember, doubt is an energy, and so is fear, so is the anger, so is the mask. These are all big, giant roadblocks. And when you remove those, you're allowing love to flow. And with love, it's going to flow energy. And with love is going to flow connection. So the more, if you want these gifts, then you take the mask away and you just are who you are. And you let people see that, flaws and all. You were talking about like becoming who you want to, the person you're going to be, opening up the space to become that. And that's what I see, what I hope, that this is for all humanity. Like, okay, let's say in the past we lived a certain way and we had limited beliefs and we based our lives on these limited constructs of what we thought was possible. And now that we know those don't work and they're insufficient, well, let's start opening up our imagination. And how do you do that? Well, it's openness, it's love, it's grace, right? It's giving people the capacity to be more than who they were today.
It's interesting. We have a mentor who talks about his mother all the time, and she's a very devout Christian, and she sees miracles and everything and vocalizes it. Somebody opens the door for her and she says, "Isn't God great?" It's funny because he imitates her with a Southern accent. It's often funny, but he's like, "Isn't God great? Aren't there miracles? There are miracles everywhere." If you say, and the reality is there are miracles everywhere. If it just depends. What happens is I think we have this limited definition of what a miracle is. And so we just discard those things, magical things that occur. You go to push a button on an elevator and the door opens before you even push the button. Like, not that but it could be like we have this sort of narrow focus of what love and miracles are all about.
I think when you start opening up your heart to faith and to believing in something, I'm just saying, let's just believe. Let's just believe that I'm going to experience kindness today, or I'm going to be, I'm going to be successful in getting my goals accomplished. Something really simple, right? But just instead of going, I don't get it, I never do all the things I want to do. Instead of being negative towards yourself, just being gracious and believing in yourself. Just start there, and being loving to yourself. And then what happens is it starts to work.
It's self-fulfilling.
It feels exactly. And then this is what I'm saying. Like, what we don't realize is that these things, love and hold on 1 second. I think he's grabbing it.
You got the phone.
As we're talking, anyways, by the way, what Katie's talking about is right. It's manifesting those things that you want in your life.
Sorry, I had to grab it just because I wasn't sure, but can y'all hear it?
Yeah, no,
just barely.
Yeah,
we're good. We're good.
Okay.
We're good. Yeah. We're at that point.
As much as we can. And by the way, let me just say this. This is why we love Katie so much. Katie is love, right? That is really what it's all about. Love and faith and hope and openness.
And I want people to understand, and this is what comes across in our story, is how very flawed I am as a person. I am very flawed. I have lost it. I have blown it. I have been despairing. I have lost my temper. I have, done things I wish I hadn't done, and believed things I wish I hadn't believed, and held resentments that I wish I hadn't. I've done all those things that we've all done. And, there's that, internal battle that we have with ourselves, right? Where we keep beating ourselves up for things that have passed. And I think one of my favorite chapters in the book is, about receiving forgiveness and receiving, the grace. And I think there's this isn't about, we need to, beat up on people for having limited, viewpoints, or beat up on people for not having faith. No, because we've all been there at some point. What we need to do is be the friends that all of us need, and show the grace that we ourselves want, and just, love our neighbor like ourselves, right? Like, be that person.
Yeah.
There you go.
Some people need to see in order to believe, but there's a lot to believing in order to see it, right? And I think seeing the best and seeing the good in other people. As we're going to wrap this special edition of Just Two Dads, and we hate to do it. We hate to end it because there's so much more we can talk about. Check out the podcast on every podcast outlet, the Telepathy Tapes. You're going to hear more of Katie and Houston's story, episode 3, but don't skip episodes 1 through 2. Go through the whole. It's 10 episodes. It's fascinating. Ky Dickens is an amazing storyteller as well. And you were such a big part of this series of episodes. So I'm grateful that I got a copy of the tapes and that I was able to share. And I've talked about everybody about it on a daily basis. I talk about it. It's worth it. Listen to the Telepathy Tapes. Pick up the Book of Heaven by Katie and Houston. You will dip into a world that is fascinating and beyond your imagination. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and catching us on all the podcast outlets and on WSTX AM radio. I don't know if they're going to catch the whole show. We'll find out. And on Facebook. And show notes will be in Facebook. And thank you to Billy Footwear and participate in the Den. We'll have links to the Den for those that want to participate there. Katie, we love you so much. We the beginning a couple years ago of a long relationship with you, and we're grateful to have you in our space. And empathy and love, as I always say, empathy. You never know what somebody's going through. Give grace, as you said, and love. Look at the world through the lenses of love. The world's such a much more beautiful place when it's surrounded by love. Katie, thank you, and I'll throw it to Sean.
Guys, thank you both so much. I mean, this play, like the two of y'all, it really does fill my heart, because and also just because I know y'all get it. I know that y'all come from that place as a parent that gives everything, and that's the only option. And so I feel that, and I think everybody who listens feels the same thing, because y'all are just a blessing.
Thank
you. That means so much to us. Let's try and be more childlike. Let's try this. It's often said that misery loves company, but so does joy. Don't forget that. It's been said that worry is a misuse of our imagination, because it is powerful. And the last thing, try your best to consider that every day is a dream come true. I understand that most people, there are some people who, depending on where they are in life, may think that it doesn't matter if they're not here. So therefore, they may see little value in being able to see yet another day. But unless that's your thought, first of all, if that is your thought, you're worth more than you think. And for most people, that isn't their thought. And realize, don't take for granted just waking up. Every day is, in fact, a dream come true, because the day exists. And there's more to you than you. Thank you so much. And within the sound of my voice, to each and every one, we love you. Thank you.
Katie, we love you. Give Houston a hug for us. We're looking forward to spending more time with him.
Bye, guys.
See you all.
Bye.